Hey plant lovers, welcome back. Here's a claim that sounds backwards until you understand the plant. The fastest way to grow a jade plant into a thick, sculptural tree-like specimen is to keep cutting pieces off of it. Not feeding it more. Not repotting it into a giant container. Cutting it. Most people do the exact opposite. They let their jade grow untouched for years, hoping it'll bulk up on its own, and they end up with a tall, floppy, top-heavy thing that leans against the window and snaps under its own weight. The people who own those gorgeous, gnarled jade trees you see in photos, they reached for the shears early and often. I want to share what I learned researching how that transformation actually happens. Because once you understand the mechanism underneath it, the whole thing stops feeling like luck and starts feeling like something you control. Let's start with where this plant comes from, because the origin explains almost everything about how it behaves in your living room. The jade plant, Crassula ovata, is native to South Africa, specifically the rocky hillsides and dry scrubland of the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal provinces. The horticultural team at the New York Botanical Garden describes its wild habitat as sandy slopes and open fields, the kind of exposed, sun-blasted, low-water terrain where a soft plant simply wouldn't survive. So jade didn't evolve to be soft. It evolved to store water in those fleshy leaves, to grow slow and woody, and to hold itself upright in full African sun with nobody watering it on a schedule. That matters because the plant in your home is running ancient instructions written for a much harsher place. When you understand those instructions, you stop fighting the plant and start working with it. Think about what that South African hillside actually demands. The rain comes seasonally and then disappears for long stretches. The sun is relentless. The soil is thin and gritty and drains in seconds. A plant living there can't afford to grow a lot of soft, thirsty tissue, because soft tissue wilts and dies the first time the water runs out. So jade made a different bet. It packed water into thick leaves and stems, grew a woody skeleton that could hold itself up without constant moisture, and slowed its whole metabolism down to stretch every drop it got. The deep green leaves even tint red at the edges in bright light, a kind of natural sunscreen the plant produces under stress. None of that is accidental. Every trait is an answer to a hard environment. Now bring that plant indoors, into a heated American living room, and watch what happens when people treat it like a fern. They water it on a weekly schedule, whether it needs it or not. They tuck it into a dim corner, away from the harsh light it actually craves. And the plant, confused, throws out weak, stretchy, pale growth, reaching desperately for light that isn't there. That's not a sick plant. That's a desert plant being raised in the wrong climate. Here's the part nobody talks about. Almost every jade problem you'll ever have traces straight back to forgetting where this plant came from. Now here's the single most important thing to understand, the thing that everything else in this video depends on. It's called apical dominance. Every jade stem has a growing tip at the very top. That tip produces a plant hormone called auxin. Auxin flows down the stem, and as it travels, it does one specific job. It tells all the dormant buds lower down on the stem to stay asleep. The plant is essentially saying, I'm pouring my energy into growing taller, so the rest of you, stand down. As long as that top tip stays happy and intact, your jade keeps doing one thing and one thing only. It grows up. Taller and taller, leggier and leggier, a single pole reaching for the light. That's why your untouched jade looks like a telephone pole instead of a tree. Let me make this concrete, because the hormone part can sound abstract until you picture it. Auxin is produced at the very tip and moves downward through the stem in one direction. The further a bud sits from that tip, the weaker the suppression signal becomes by the time it arrives. But on a young, single-stemmed jade, the stem isn't long enough for the signal to fade, so every lower bud stays locked down tight. The plant pours everything into vertical extension. It's not being stubborn, it's being efficient in the only way it knows. In the wild, racing a competitor to the sunlight is a winning strategy. On your windowsill, with no competition and plenty of light, that same strategy just makes a sad, leaning pole. So how do you break it? You remove the tip. The moment you cut off that growing point, the auxin signal drops, and those sleeping buds below the cut suddenly wake up. Within about 3 to 5 weeks, 1, 2, sometimes 3 new shoots push out right below where you cut. One stem becomes 2. Do it again next year, and 2 become 4. That's the entire game. That's how a single skinny stem turns into a branching canopy. Cut where 2 leaves meet the stem, that little junction called a node, and the new branches emerge right there, on the same sides as those leaves. This is the part nobody tells you. You can aim the growth. If you want a sparse area to fill in, you cut just above a node facing that gap, and the plant grows toward it. You're not just trimming, you're directing traffic. If you take one thing from this whole video, take that. The tip suppresses everything below it. Remove the tip, and the plant fills out. It's that simple. Before I go further, do me a favor. If this is already making your jade make more sense, hit subscribe, because I dig into the actual biology behind plant care, instead of just repeating the same 5 tips everyone copies from each other. That's the whole reason this channel exists. Okay, so we know the mechanism. Now let's talk about the actual moves and the reasoning behind each one. Because the reasoning is what lets you make good decisions on your own plant instead of just copying mine. The first move is timing your big prune. You want to do your main shaping cut in early spring, right as the plant wakes up for the growing season. The New York Botanical Gardens guidance is specifically to prune in early spring, and there's a clean biological reason for it. When the plant is actively growing, it heals its cuts fast and pushes new shoots quickly. Cut a jade in the dead of winter when it's dormant, and the wound just sits there, open and slow to respond, sometimes for months. Same cut, completely different result, purely because of when you made it. Think about that. Half of good plant care isn't what you do, it's when. Here's the mistake I see constantly. Someone gets inspired in November, watches a pruning video, grabs their shears, and goes to town on their jade. Then they spend the next 3 months staring at bare stumps that aren't doing anything, convinced they killed the plant. They didn't kill it. They pruned it into its rest period, when it has no intention of pushing new growth, no matter what you cut. The shears were fine. The calendar was wrong. So if the urge to prune hits you in the cold months, write it down and wait for spring. The plant will reward your patience with a fast, vigorous response instead of a long, silent sulk. The second move is what you actually remove in that spring prune. And here, the rule is restraint. Take off up to about 1/3 of the plant, no more, in a single session. You can cut every branch back by the same amount for an even look, or vary the lengths for a more natural, wild shape. But you stop at 1/3. Why? Because every leaf you remove is a little solar panel and a little water tank. Strip too many at once, and you've gutted the plant's ability to feed itself right when it needs energy to heal and resprout. 1/3 is the sweet spot. Enough to trigger a strong branching response, not so much that you starve the recovery. The third move is the one that builds the trunk, and it's the one most people are too nervous to do. You cut back the long, leggy, stretched out stems hard. If a stem has run out way too far before branching, all bare wood and a tuft of leaves at the end, you bring it back to just 1 or 2 nodes from where it started. It feels brutal. You're removing this long, beautiful piece and leaving a stump. But here's what's happening underneath. Cutting back a leggy stem doesn't just trigger new branches. It redistributes weight back toward the center and forces the main stem to thicken to support the new, denser growth. That thickening is the trunk. That's what turns a houseplant into a little tree. There's a deeper reason this works, and it's worth understanding. A stem thickens in response to the load it has to carry and the light it sits in. When you force a dense cluster of new branches to grow out of a once skinny stem, that stem now has more weight to support, so it lays down more woody tissue to hold it. Bright light accelerates the same process. This is also why you specifically target the thick, woody stems with brown rings around them when you choose what to cut, rather than the soft green tips. The general rule researchers and experienced growers point to is that the thicker the stem you prune, the more branches it tends to produce, and the more it drives that trunk thickening response. You're not just removing material, you're sending the plant a structural message. Hold more, so build stronger. Now, a warning, because I learned this one the slow way. When you cut into old, woody, brown bark stem instead of soft green growth, the plant responds much more slowly. Soft green tissue resprouts fast. Hardened woody tissue can take a long time to push new branches, and the area can look awkward and bare for a while before it fills back in. So if you're going to make a dramatic cut into thick wood, make peace with the wait. It will fill in. It just operates on the plant's timeline, not yours. Patience is part of the technique, not separate from it. The fourth move is something almost nobody talks about, and it's purely about showing off the structure you've built. It's removing the lower leaves, what gardeners call defoliating. Once your jade starts branching, the lower leaves clustered around the branch junctions hide all that beautiful architecture. So you gently twist them off, just the ones right below where the stem splits. You're not doing this for the plant's health. You're doing it the way a sculptor clears away clay to reveal the form underneath. Suddenly, you can see the thick trunk, the branching points, the canopy sitting up top like a real tree. The structure was always there. You're just uncovering it. A word of caution here, because this is the step where eager people overdo it. Don't strip a young plant bare. The leaves are the plant's food factory, and a small jade that's still building its frame needs most of them. Defoliating is a finishing move for a plant that already has real branching to show off, not a shortcut to make a baby plant look like a bonsai overnight. On a young one, take only a few of the lowest leaves and let the rest work. The reveal comes later, once there's something underneath worth revealing. Here's where it gets interesting though, because there's a second benefit to clearing those lower leaves that connects right back to where we started. Stripping the bottom leaves and keeping the lower stem exposed encourages the plant to push its energy and growth upward, which reinforces that tree-on-a-trunk silhouette instead of a low, bushy mound. So, defoliating isn't only cosmetic. It nudges the whole growth habit in the direction you want. And the fifth move isn't really a move at all. It's the one ingredient you can't shortcut: time. A jade tree is years of small decisions stacked on top of each other. A rooted leaf cutting might take 18 to 24 months just to reach 4 inches tall. A stem cutting with a few nodes might double its height in a year, but it still isn't a mature plant, just a bigger young one. The thick, woody, decades-looking specimens that made you want one in the first place are often 6, 8, 10 years old, sometimes far older. Some of the grandest jades passed down in families have been alive longer than the people tending them. There is no fertilizer, no hack, no special variety that collapses that timeline. Anyone selling you a jade tree in a season is selling you a plant somebody else already spent years growing. What pruning does is not make the plant grow faster overall. What it does is take the same amount of growth and redirect it, away from one tall, flimsy pole and into dense branching and a thickening trunk. You're not speeding the plant up, you're aiming it. Year after year, one cut at a time. Do you see what this means? The person with the stunning jade tree didn't have better luck or a better plant. They just made the cuts, on time, and then waited. You can do exactly that. Before I give you the care underneath all of it, let me run through the handful of mistakes that quietly sabotage people, because avoiding these matters as much as doing the right moves. The first one I already mentioned: cutting between nodes instead of just above one. There are no dormant buds in the bare space between nodes, so nothing sprouts, and you've left a dead stub that just sits there browning. Always find the node and cut a few millimeters above it. The second mistake is pruning too much at once out of impatience. People decide they want a tree this year, so they hack off half the plant in one weekend. The jade can't support that loss, recovery stalls, and the whole project goes backward. A third per session, maximum. Shaping a jade is a multi-year conversation, not a single dramatic afternoon. The third mistake is the most heartbreaking, because it comes from caring too much. People prune, see the bare cut, panic that the plant looks worse, and start watering it constantly to help it recover. That's exactly backwards. The fresh cut and the soggy soil combine into stem rot, and now the plant really is in trouble. Pruning plus restraint on the watering can is the correct pairing. Cutting plus drowning is how a healthy jade dies. And the fourth, quietly, is low light. You can prune perfectly and still get a weak, stretchy result if the plant doesn't have enough light to build sturdy new growth. In dim conditions, the plant keeps its auxin signal strong, and the lower buds stay suppressed even after you cut, which means your prune does far less than it should. Light isn't separate from pruning. Light is what makes the pruning work. Let me give you the practical care underneath all of it, because none of this pruning works on a plant that isn't otherwise healthy. Light first. Jade needs bright light, and a lot of it. The New York Botanical Garden notes that without enough light, these plants grow weak and misshapen, stretching and flopping. Bright light does the opposite. It promotes thicker, woodier, sturdier stems, which is exactly the trunk material you're trying to build. A south or west-facing window in most U.S. homes is ideal. If your jade is leaning hard toward the glass, it's begging for more. And if a window genuinely can't deliver, a basic grow light closes the gap. Jade isn't fussy about the source, only the amount. One more thing on light that surprises people. Rotating the pot a quarter turn every week or two keeps the plant growing evenly on all sides, instead of lunging toward the window and developing a permanent lean. It's a tiny habit, but over years, it's the difference between a balanced tree and a plant that always looks like it's trying to escape. Water is where most jades die, and they die from too much, not too little. This is a desert plant. Let the soil dry out almost completely between waterings. Then water thoroughly until it runs out the drainage holes. And never let the pot sit in a saucer of standing water. Overwatering rots the roots and the stems, and it'll undo all your careful shaping in a matter of weeks. When in doubt, wait. The plant stores its own water in those leaves. It's fine. Here's a tell most people miss. A thirsty jade gives you a clear, harmless warning before there's any real problem. The leaves go slightly soft and a little wrinkled, like a grape starting to dry. That's your green light to water. An overwatered jade, on the other hand, gives you leaves that turn yellow, mushy, and translucent. And by the time you see that, rot may already be moving through the stem. So if you're ever unsure which way to air dry. A jade recovers from a missed watering in an afternoon. It may not recover from a rotted base at all. After you make a fresh pruning cut, this gets even more important. Don't water heavily right away, because an open wound sitting in damp conditions is an invitation for rot to enter exactly where the plant is most vulnerable. Let it settle first. Soil and pot. Use a fast-draining mix. A cactus and succulent soil works perfectly, and you can grab a bag at any Home Depot or Lowe's. Plant it in a container with drainage holes. Terracotta is a friend here because it breathes and pulls excess moisture out of the soil. Don't rush to a huge pot either. Jade is comfortable a little snug, and an oversized pot just holds wet soil that the small root system can't use, which brings us right back to rot. There's actually a hidden advantage to keeping a jade slightly root-bound, and it ties right back to the tree goal. A snug pot keeps the plant compact and steers its energy into thickening what's already there, rather than racing to fill a huge volume of soil with roots. Repot only every couple of years, in spring, and step up just one pot size when you do. If you've ever wondered why a friend's ancient jade in a small pot looks like a museum piece, while your fast-potted one looks gangly, this is a big part of the answer. Restraint with the pot is restraint that pays off in trunk. And one last thing on the cuts themselves. Always use clean, sharp shears and make your cut cleanly just above a node, not in the bare space between nodes. Cut between the nodes, and there are simply no buds there to activate, so nothing resprouts, and you're left with a dead stub. Just above the node, every time. And here's a bonus most people miss entirely. Every healthy piece you cut off is a free new plant. Let the cut end dry and callous for a few days, set it in dry, succulent soil, and it'll root. The same prune that shapes your tree hands you the start of your next one. So here's the whole thing, brought back together. Jade grows up because of apical dominance. You break that dominance with a cut above a node, and the plant branches. You time your big prune for early spring so it heals fast. You cut back the leggy stems to thicken the trunk and accept that woody cuts are slow. You clear the lower leaves to reveal the form and push growth upward. You give it bright light, dry then soak watering, and fast draining soil. And then you give it the one thing it actually requires, which is years. What strikes me most about this plant is how honestly it rewards patience. There's no faking a jade tree. You can't buy your way to that thick trunk overnight. Every gnarl and branch is a record of a decision someone made and then waited on. In a world that's always promising faster, this plant just quietly insists on real time. Maybe that's worth something beyond the windowsill. If you found this useful, leave a comment and tell me how old your jade is and what shape you're going for, a bushy mound or a tall tree. Because I read the comments, and I'll give you a specific pruning suggestion for where your plant is right now. That's genuinely my favorite part of doing this. Take care of your plants.